The sun was just beginning to sink over the horizon at Santa Monica Pier, painting the sky in soft orange and pink colors. The air smelled like sea salt and cotton candy, and the wooden planks underfoot creaked as waves rolled beneath them. Among the crowd of people laughing, taking photos, and watching street performers, there was a girl sitting quietly in a wheelchair near the railing. Her name was Lily. She looked about 16, with long brown hair tied back in a ponytail. She wore a light blue jacket and had a small backpack hanging on the side of her chair. Her eyes followed the ocean waves, moving back and forth as if she could hear them speaking to her. For Lily, this spot had become her favorite place since her family moved to California. Every Sunday she came here to watch the sunset and listen to the sound of the water hitting the pillars below. It made her feel peaceful, like life still had beauty, even when so many things had changed. A year earlier, she had been in an accident that left her unable to walk. The first few months after it happened were the hardest. Everything she used to do, running, dancing, climbing stairs, was suddenly gone. But she was strong. She had learned to move around in her wheelchair with ease, and she tried her best not to let sadness win. Still, not everyone around her understood what she went through. Some people stared too long, some whispered. Most days she ignored it. But deep down, she wished people would just see her for who she was, not for what she had lost. That Sunday, the pier was busier than usual. Families were eating fries, kids were running with balloons, and street musicians played songs that filled the air with a happy rhythm. Lily smiled, holding a cup of lemonade in her hand. She felt like she belonged there, among strangers who didn't know her story, but shared the same sunset. She watched a group of people feeding seagulls and laughed when one bird snatched food from someone's hand. Then she looked out toward the water again. The calm sound of the waves made her forget everything else. But not far away, a group of 4 teenagers walked down the pier, laughing loudly. They looked about her age, maybe a bit older. They were dressed in casual beach clothes, holding sodas and fries, joking about random things. Their laughter was carefree, until their eyes fell on Lily. At first, it was just whispers between them, the kind that people use when they think no one's listening. One boy nudged another and pointed toward her wheelchair. They laughed again. Lily noticed it but didn't react. She had seen that look before. She had learned not to give attention to every unkind glance. The group got closer, still talking among themselves. She could hear a few of their words now. Nothing too loud, but enough to make her heart sink a little. She kept her eyes on the ocean, pretending not to notice. Then one of them said something louder, something that made her freeze. The words weren't kind. They cut through the sound of the waves like a knife. For a second, she thought maybe she had misheard. She didn't want to believe people could be that cruel in such a peaceful place. She stayed quiet, hoping they would just walk away. But instead, they came closer. The tallest one walked right in front of her, blocking her view of the ocean. He smiled, but not a friendly smile. It was the kind of grin that came from someone who liked having power over someone else. "Hey," he said casually, leaning a little closer. "You like watching waves, huh?" Lily looked up slowly and nodded. "Yeah," she said softly. "It's relaxing." He shrugged. "Yeah, I guess. Must be boring, though, just sitting all day." The other teens laughed. One of them, a girl with blonde hair, rolled her eyes and added, "Come on, let's go. This is awkward." But the tall boy didn't move. He looked at Lily's wheelchair, then back at her. "You know," he said, "if you move a bit, we could take a picture here. This is like the best spot." Lily hesitated. She didn't want any trouble. "You can take it," she said quietly. "I can move." She started to roll her chair back a few inches, but the boy suddenly stepped closer and said sharply, "I said move, Cripple." The words hit harder than a shove. Lily's breath caught in her chest. She didn't say anything. She couldn't. Her throat tightened as she looked down, wishing she could disappear. The group burst out laughing. Not all of them, but enough to make it hurt. One of them nudged her chair slightly with his foot and said, "Whoa, relax, we're joking." Lily's hands trembled on the wheels of her chair. "Please," she said softly, "don't." The laughter faded for a second, replaced by awkward silence. People nearby noticed what was happening. Some looked uncomfortable, others just watched. No one stepped forward. A little boy tugged his mother's hand and pointed, but she quickly turned him away. A man eating ice cream glanced over, frowned, then kept walking. Lily's eyes filled with tears. She didn't want to cry in front of them. She wanted to be strong. She had been through worse, she told herself, but still it hurt, not because of the words themselves, but because it reminded her of everything she had fought so hard to overcome. The tall boy laughed again, trying to play it off like a joke, but something about her silence made him uneasy, maybe even guilty. Still, he didn't apologize. He just turned away and said, "Come on, let's go," to his friends. They followed him, still whispering and chuckling as they disappeared into the crowd. Lily sat there for a long moment, staring at the ocean again. The water no longer looked peaceful. It looked blurry through her tears. She wiped her face quickly, pretending nothing had happened, but her heart was beating fast. Her hands felt cold even though the sun was warm. She wanted to leave, but her wheels were locked and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Don't cry," she whispered to herself. "Don't give them that." But then, something unexpected happened. The sound of footsteps, heavy and slow, came from behind her. She didn't turn around right away, but she felt it. The presence of someone tall standing nearby. A deep voice spoke quietly. "You okay, kid?" Lily turned slightly. Behind her stood a man wearing a black leather jacket with patches stitched across the back. His hands were covered in rings and a dark bandana hung from his neck. He looked like one of those bikers she sometimes saw riding along the coast. She nodded quickly. "Yeah," she said, trying to sound fine. "I'm okay." He studied her for a second, his brow furrowed. "Did those kids bother you?" She looked away. "No, it's fine," she whispered. The man didn't push further. He just nodded and said, "All right." Then he walked a few steps ahead, glancing down the pier in the direction the teens had gone. A few other bikers were standing by their motorcycles nearby, talking and laughing. One of them noticed the man looking and asked, "Everything good?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked back at Lily, who was still trying to calm herself down. Finally, he gave a small nod to his friend. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Just keep an eye out." Lily turned her chair slightly toward the ocean again. The waves kept moving, slow and endless, like nothing had happened. The smell of salt and fries filled the air again, and the sound of laughter from somewhere down the pier blended with the crash of the surf. But something felt different now. She didn't know it yet, but that brief moment, that quiet exchange between her and the stranger, was going to change everything about this day. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the wooden boards. The bikers stayed nearby, talking in low voices. And though Lily didn't say a word, she felt strangely safe knowing they were there. The bullies were gone, but their words still echoed in her mind. She wished people would understand how hard it was to stay strong every day. How much effort it took to smile when the world often looked at her with pity or judgment. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely alone. As the wind grew cooler and the first lights on the pier flickered on, Lily took one last look at the horizon. The ocean was calm again. The sky was fading into soft blue and purple shades. She smiled faintly, not because everything was okay, but because she still believed it could be. And somewhere behind her, the quiet rumble of motorcycle engines began to rise, a sound that soon enough would make the entire pier stop and stare. The sky had turned a deep shade of orange when Lily finally gathered herself again. The ocean waves were calmer now, and the evening breeze carried the smell of food from nearby stalls. The laughter of children and the chatter of tourists filled the air, helping to mask the sting of what had just happened. She wanted to move past it, to pretend those cruel words hadn't been said. She looked down at her hands resting on the wheels of her chair and took a slow breath. She whispered quietly, "You're okay, Lily, you're okay." She believed it for a moment. Then she rolled herself a little closer to the railing just to watch the water again, but deep inside a small part of her still hurt. The look on the boy's face, the laughter of his friends, it kept playing in her mind like a song she couldn't turn off. She hated that her body still shook from something as small as a few mean words. She hated that they had that kind of power over her. Behind her, life on the pier continued as usual. Couples took photos, a man sold painted seashells, and a musician played guitar near the Ferris wheel. The sun kept sinking lower, throwing streaks of gold across the waves. Everything looked peaceful again. Then somewhere behind her she heard that same group of teenagers. Their voices carried through the crowd, loud, careless, familiar. Her stomach turned. She didn't want to look, but curiosity made her glance over her shoulder. They were back, not too far away, standing near a food cart, laughing and talking again like nothing had happened. The tall boy who had insulted her earlier had a soda in his hand, and the others were still making jokes. One of them pointed toward her again. Lily looked away quickly, pretending not to notice. She tried to stay calm, but her hands tightened around her wheels. She told herself they wouldn't come near her again. They had their fun, they'd move on. But the sound of their footsteps said otherwise. She could feel them approaching before she even saw them. Her heart started beating faster. Her throat went dry. She stared straight ahead, hoping maybe if she didn't react, they'd just pass by. "Hey," one of the voices said again. The same tall boy. "We're back. You still mad?" Lily didn't answer. She didn't even turn. He stepped closer, just enough for his shadow to fall over her lap. "Come on, don't be like that." "It was just a joke." She stayed silent, still looking at the ocean. One of the girls spoke this time, her voice nervous but still amused. "Let's just go." "This is weird," but the tall boy didn't move. "We're just talking," he said. Then leaning on the railing beside her, he added, "Didn't mean to hurt your feelings, you know. You gotta learn to laugh sometimes." Lily still said nothing. She had learned that people who wanted to bother you often got bored when you didn't respond. But her silence didn't bother him. It seemed to make him want to push more. "Fine," he said, smirking. "We'll take our photo then." He turned to his friends. "Right here's the best spot, right?" One of the others shrugged, not really looking comfortable anymore. "Man, just leave her alone," he muttered, but the tall boy ignored him. He moved closer, standing just behind Lily's chair, and said, "Hey, you mind moving a little to the side?" Lily's hands trembled slightly on her wheels. "I said you could take it," she whispered. "You don't need to ask again," he laughed quietly. "I'm just being polite." He lifted his phone and snapped a picture anyway, pretending to aim at the view behind her but clearly trying to include her in the frame. His friends laughed again, though not as loud this time. People walking by started to glance over. Lily wished someone would step in, not to start a fight, just to make it stop. She could feel her face getting hot. The moment felt endless, and then, as if fate had decided enough was enough, a low, deep sound rolled across the pier, the rumble of motorcycle engines starting nearby. The tall boy turned his head slightly, distracted for a second. Down at the end of the pier, a group of bikers were getting ready to leave after their afternoon ride. They were impossible to miss, and tall, broad, wearing black leather jackets and boots. The leader of the group was the same man who had spoken to Lily earlier. He looked over and his eyes met hers again. He could tell something was wrong. Maybe it was the way she sat, stiff, nervous, her hands gripping the sides of her chair. Maybe it was the small crowd forming a few steps away, watching but not helping. The man said something to one of his biker friends, then nodded in Lily's direction. Lily didn't realize at first that he was walking toward her. She was too focused on the group in front of her. The tall boy had gone quiet now, noticing how the mood had changed. His smile faded when he saw several bikers heading their way, their boots thudding against the wood with heavy steps. "Hey, let's go," one of his friends whispered, pulling on his sleeve. "Relax," the tall boy muttered, though his voice wasn't as confident anymore. He took a step back from Lily's chair, pretending to check his phone. The bikers stopped a few feet away. The man in front crossed his arms. His voice was calm but carried enough weight to make anyone listen. "Everything all right here?" The tall boy looked up, surprised. Yeah, we're good," he said quickly. "Just talking." The man's eyes moved to Lily. "That true?" he asked gently. Lily hesitated, her voice quiet. "They were bothering me," she said. But it's okay now. The man didn't look convinced. His jaw tightened slightly. He looked back at the boy and said, "Son, if I were you, I'd walk away right now." A few people nearby had stopped to watch. The air around them felt tense but not loud, quiet like everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The tall boy gave a nervous laugh. "We didn't do anything," he said, trying to sound casual. The man didn't move. "I saw enough," he said flatly. "Leave her alone." For a moment no one spoke. Then the boy nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, okay, whatever." He turned to his friends. "Let's go." They began to walk off, but not fast enough to hide their embarrassment. The crowd slowly went back to what they were doing. Lily sat still, breathing a little easier now. The man waited until the teenagers were out of sight before turning to her again. "You okay now?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "Thank you." He smiled faintly. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "You shouldn't have to deal with that at all." The other bikers came closer, forming a small circle around her chair. Not in a threatening way, but in a protective one. One of them, a woman with short hair and kind eyes, crouched down and said, "They didn't hurt you, right?" "No," Lily said, "just said things." The woman nodded slowly. "Well, you don't deserve that." "Nobody does." For the first time since the incident began, Lily felt like she could breathe again. The tension in her shoulders started to fade. She looked at the bikers around her, people who looked rough on the outside but whose kindness showed in their eyes. The man who had spoken first looked toward the crowd and then back at her. "You come here a lot?" he asked. "Sometimes," Lily replied. "I like the ocean. It helps me think," he smiled. "Good spot for that," he said. "You picked the best view." She smiled back a little shyly. "I guess so." The woman stood up, brushing her hands on her jeans. "You know," she said, "we come down here every Sunday evening. You should stop by next time. Nobody will bother you when we're around." Lily's heart softened at that. She didn't know what to say. "That's really kind," she said quietly. "It's nothing," the man said with a shrug. "Just people looking out for people." He gave her a small nod before walking back to his bike. The others followed, talking among themselves, but they didn't leave yet. They stayed parked near the railing, their engines rumbling softly as the lights of the pier started to glow in the darkening sky. Lily sat there a few minutes longer, watching the ocean again. She could still hear the sound of the motorcycles behind her, steady and strong, like a promise that she wasn't invisible anymore. The same wind that had carried cruel laughter before now carried something different, the sound of safety, of people who cared even though they didn't know her. She smiled faintly as she looked out over the water. The sunset was almost gone now, the last streaks of gold fading into the horizon. For the first time that day, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel broken. Somewhere inside her, a quiet confidence began to grow again. She didn't know what the bikers would do next. But she sensed this story wasn't over yet. Something told her that the next few moments on this pier would be remembered for a long, long time. The evening light had turned soft and golden when the crowd on the pier began to thin. The smell of popcorn and sea breeze mixed together as the sound of the waves grew louder than the chatter. Lily sat quietly in her wheelchair, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The sun was slowly sinking into the ocean, leaving behind a trail of light that shimmered across the water. Behind her, the bikers were still parked near the end of the pier. Their motorcycles stood in a neat line, shining under the fading sunlight. The man who had spoken to her earlier stood with his arms crossed, talking to his friends. They laughed every now and then, but their eyes often drifted toward where Lily sat. They were making sure she was safe. Lily felt that. Even though no one said a word, their presence gave her a sense of comfort. For the first time that day, she didn't feel so alone. She could hear the soft hum of one of the motorcycle engines still running, like a heartbeat behind her. But just as things began to feel peaceful again, a sound in the distance broke that calm. It was laughter, loud, careless, and familiar. The same group of teenagers had come back once more. They walked toward the pier holding their drinks, still joking among themselves. Lily felt her chest tighten. She had hoped they were gone for good. She turned slightly in her chair, trying not to make eye contact. Maybe if she looked calm, they would walk past her this time. But luck didn't work that way tonight. The tall boy noticed her again. He stopped mid-step and grinned at his friends. "There's our friend again," he said, loud enough for her to hear. Lily froze. She didn't answer, didn't look at him. She wished she could just disappear into the sound of the ocean. "Relax, I'm just saying hi," the boy added, walking closer. His friends followed hesitantly, some looking unsure. The air felt different now, heavier somehow. People nearby started to glance over. The bikers at the other end of the pier noticed too. One of them put out his cigarette and said quietly, "There they go again." The leader turned his head slightly. His face didn't show anger, but there was something in his eyes, something protective. Without saying a word, he started walking toward Lily. The tall boy was still talking. "You didn't even thank us for leaving earlier," he said, leaning on the railing beside her. "That's kind of rude, don't you think?" Lily's fingers gripped the side of her chair. She didn't say anything. She didn't trust her voice not to shake. "Hey," the boy said again, pretending to laugh. "I'm talking to you." His friends stood behind him, silent now. One of them whispered, "Let's just go, man," but the boy didn't listen. He seemed to enjoy the attention. Then, before he could say another word, a shadow fell across them. The tall biker had reached them. He stood still for a moment, his presence calm but strong. His leather jacket caught the light, and the silver chain around his neck gleamed faintly. The boy turned around, surprised. "Something funny here?" the man asked, his voice low and steady. The tall boy took a small step back. "We were just talking," he said quickly. The man's eyes didn't move from him. Didn't sound like talking. The air went quiet. Even the nearby street performers stopped playing for a moment. Everyone on that stretch of the pier seemed to be watching. The boy laughed nervously. "It's nothing. We weren't doing anything." The man tilted his head slightly. "You sure about that?" The boy didn't answer. By now, the rest of the bikers had started walking over too. Their boots echoed on the wooden planks. There were about a dozen of them, men and women of all ages, dressed in black jackets, patches stitched across their backs. They didn't look angry. They looked steady, united, and sure of themselves. The teenagers froze in place. The tall boy looked around as if trying to figure out whether to stay or leave. His earlier confidence was gone. One of the bikers, a woman with dark sunglasses and a calm expression, stopped beside Lily. She smiled gently at her and said, "Hey, sweetheart, you okay?" Lily nodded slowly. "Yeah," she whispered. "I think so." The woman nodded back, then looked at the tall boy. "You done bothering her?" He raised his hand slightly. "I told you we weren't—" The leader interrupted softly. "You should stop talking now." The boy went quiet. His friends were already stepping back. The crowd that had gathered around the scene began to whisper. Phones were coming out, people were recording. The man looked at Lily again, his tone changing to something kind. "You want us to stay here for a bit?" Lily looked at the group of teenagers, then back at him. "Please," she said softly. He nodded once. "Then that's what we'll do." The bikers formed a loose circle around her, not too close, just enough that she felt safe. The tall boy looked trapped for a moment. Then, trying to save face, he said, "All right. We're leaving, whatever." "Good idea," the man said simply. The group turned and started walking away, but not before one of the younger bikers called out, "Next time you see someone like her, maybe try being a decent human." The boy didn't reply. He just kept walking, his face red. The pier went silent except for the sound of the waves below. Lily let out a shaky breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The bikers relaxed a little, and a few of them smiled at her. The woman beside her knelt slightly and said, "Don't let people like that make you forget who you are, all right?" Lily nodded, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she said. "All of you." The leader smiled faintly. "You don't owe us thanks. You just deserve to be treated right, that's all." He looked around at the crowd and added in a firm but even tone, "And for anyone watching, maybe next time, don't just stand there. Sometimes it only takes one person to stop something ugly." A few people lowered their phones, looking embarrassed. Others nodded quietly. Lily looked down for a moment, then smiled softly. "You really didn't have to do this," she said. "Maybe not," the man replied. "But the world's got enough people walking past what's wrong. We'd rather not be part of that." She didn't know how to answer that, so she just smiled again. A real one this time. The bikers stayed for a while longer, talking to her, making sure she was calm. One of them brought her another drink from a nearby stall. Another helped fix her backpack strap that had come loose. They treated her like a friend, not a stranger. The woman who had spoken to her earlier leaned on the railing beside her and said, "You come here often?" "Every week," Lily said. I like the ocean, the woman smiled. Then we'll probably see you again. The leader chuckled softly. We'll make this our Sunday stop then, he said. The sound of laughter returned, but this time it was warm, kind, and real. Lily felt the heaviness in her chest finally lift. The sky had turned deep blue now, stars beginning to peek through. The lights along the pier glowed softly and music started again in the background. The whole place seemed brighter than before. Lily watched the bikers return to their motorcycles. Some of them waved as they got ready to leave. Before he started his engine, the leader looked back at her one last time. You good? He called out. She nodded. I'm good. He smiled, then put on his helmet and started the bike. The deep rumble of the engines filled the pier, turning heads. As they rode off slowly, people clapped quietly, not because of a fight, but because of what they represented: kindness, strength, and the courage to stand up for someone else. Lily sat there, the wind brushing her hair back, her heart steady again. She looked at the ocean, which shimmered under the lights. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel small or broken. She felt strong. She felt seen. As the bikers disappeared down the road, she whispered to herself, "Thank you." The waves below rolled on, calm and endless, carrying away the sound of their engine, but leaving behind something even stronger in the air. Hope. The sun had almost disappeared behind the ocean now. The sky turned deep orange and purple, and lights along the Santa Monica Pier began to glow softly, reflecting on the calm water. The crowd had thinned, but there was still enough life: the smell of fried food, the sound of laughter, and the distant music of a street performer strumming his guitar. Lily sat quietly near the railing again. Her heart had finally stopped racing after everything that had happened. The bikers were still there, not far behind her, leaning on their motorcycles and talking in low voices. She could hear them laugh from time to time, and somehow that sound felt comforting. For a long moment, everything felt peaceful again. She looked out at the ocean, watching the waves roll in slow patterns. It almost felt like the world had pressed pause, like maybe, just maybe, the bad part of her day was over. But peace never lasts long when some people haven't learned respect. From the corner of her eye, Lily saw movement again. She turned slightly and her heart sank. The same group of teenagers was walking back down the pier. This time they weren't laughing or goofing around. They looked uncomfortable, glancing at each other as they walked. It was almost like they couldn't decide if they wanted to come back, or if they were trying to prove something. The tall boy, the one who had said those cruel words earlier, was at the front. He looked nervous but also stubborn, like someone trying to act brave after being embarrassed. His friends followed him, though none of them looked happy to be there. Lily felt her chest tighten. She didn't want another scene. She wanted to leave, but her wheelchair was turned toward the railing and the crowd had grown thicker behind her. She couldn't just roll away quietly. One of the bikers noticed them first. He tapped the shoulder of the older man with the leader. The man followed his gaze and sighed softly. "You've got to be kidding me," he said under his breath. The woman biker beside him folded her arms. "They're coming back?" she asked. "Looks like it," he said. "Stay here." He started walking toward Lily again, steady and calm, but his face showed quiet disappointment, not anger. Just that tired look people get when they see something that shouldn't happen twice. The tall boy saw him coming and hesitated. For a moment he looked like he might turn back, but pride got in the way. He stopped right near Lily again and tried to sound casual. "Hey," he said, his tone uncertain. Lily didn't reply. She was staring at the ground, her fingers tight on the sides of her chair. The man reached them and stopped beside her. "Didn't we already have this talk?" he said, his voice calm but firm. The boy opened his mouth to speak but didn't have an answer. His friend stood behind him silent, avoiding eye contact. "I told you to leave her alone," the man said. "Didn't I?" The boy nodded slightly. "Yeah, but what?" The man interrupted, his voice still low. "You thought you'd come back and what, show off? Or try to prove something to your friends?" The boy looked down. He didn't know how to answer. By now, several people nearby had noticed again. A small crowd began to form, drawn by the quiet tension. Some of them recognized the bikers from earlier. Others just felt that something meaningful was happening. The man took a small step closer, his tone still even. "You know," he said, "real strength isn't about who you can make feel small. It's about who you help stand tall. The boy looked up, confused, but the man didn't let him speak. I watched what you did earlier, the man continued. You might think it's just words. Maybe you thought it was funny. But people remember moments like that. They remember how you made them feel. And someday you'll wish you'd done better. The boy's face softened a little. His friends shifted uncomfortably. The woman biker walked up beside them now. Her tone was calm but steady. You owe her an apology, she said. Not because we're here. Because you were wrong. The boy swallowed hard. He didn't want to speak, but the silence around him grew heavy. Dozens of eyes were on him now. Not mocking, not laughing, just watching. Waiting. Finally, he looked at Lily. I'm sorry, he said, his voice quiet. Lily didn't move. She didn't know what to say. It didn't sound like much, but she could tell, and even if it was small, and that it came from somewhere real. Say it like you mean it, the man said softly. The boy met her eyes. I'm sorry for what I said, he repeated, this time with more weight. I was being stupid. Lily nodded slowly. Okay, she said simply. The man gave a small nod. That's a start, he said. Then he turned to the others behind the boy. And the rest of you? The teens looked at each other awkwardly. One by one, they mumbled their apologies too. None of them sounded perfect, but they were at least trying. The crowd stayed quiet through it all. Some people even smiled, relieved to see something good come from a moment that had been so ugly. When it was over, the man said gently, Now you can walk away knowing you fixed a small piece of what you broke. That matters more than you think. The boy nodded, clearly embarrassed but also lighter somehow. Yeah, he said softly. Thanks, I guess. The man smiled faintly. Don't thank me. Just do better next time. The teens turned and began walking away, not running, not storming off, just leaving quietly. A few people in the crowd clapped softly, not out of mockery, but as if they were proud of the change they had just witnessed. When they were gone, the woman looked down at Lily. You okay? She asked kindly. Lily let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Yeah, she said. Better than before. The man smiled. You handled that better than most people would have, he said. Lily looked at him, her voice small but steady. Thank you for standing up for me. He shook his head. We just did what anyone should have done, he said. You're the one who showed strength. You didn't yell, you didn't fight back, you stayed calm. That's not easy. The crowd slowly began to disperse. But a few stayed behind to talk to Lily. A woman with her 2 kids came up and said, You're really brave, sweetheart. Another man patted the biker's shoulder and said, Good job, brother. World needs more people like you. The man smiled but didn't say much. He wasn't looking for praise. He was just glad the moment had ended the right way. A few of the bikers rolled their bikes closer. The sound of their engines filled the air again, but it wasn't loud or harsh. It was strong, steady, reassuring. One of them handed Lily her hat, which had fallen earlier, and said, Here you go. Can't let the ocean take this one. She laughed softly. Thanks. The woman patted her hand. You come down here often? Lily nodded. Yeah, every week. Well, the woman said with a smile, then you've got friends here now. Don't forget that. That sentence hit Lily deeper than she expected. Friends. It had been a long time since she had felt like she had any outside her family. As the bikers prepared to leave, the leader looked back one last time. You take care of yourself, all right? I will, Lily said. He smiled and started his bike. The deep rumble rolled across the pier as one by one the other bikes followed. People turned to watch as the group rode off, their headlights glowing softly in the night. Lily watched until they disappeared around the corner, then looked back out at the ocean. The waves moved slowly, reflecting the lights of the pier like liquid gold. She breathed in the salty air and felt calm, really calm, for the first time that day. It wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what it showed her. There were still people in the world who cared. People who didn't look away when someone needed help. She smiled faintly to herself, whispering, Maybe the world isn't so bad after all. The night had grown cooler. The pier lights glowed brighter against the dark sky. Somewhere in the distance, she could still hear the faint echo of motorcycle engines, like a promise she wouldn't forget. The next morning, The sun rose over Santa Monica with a soft golden light that touched the ocean like a promise of a new beginning. The pier looked calm again. The waves moved slowly, and the same salty breeze that always comforted Lily brushed her hair gently as she rolled down the wooden walkway. She had barely slept that night. The memory of what had happened kept replaying in her mind. The bullies, the voices, the crowd, and then the sudden appearance of the bikers who changed everything. But it wasn't the fear that stayed with her. It was the kindness, the way those strangers stepped forward without hesitation, the way they spoke to her like she mattered, like she was not someone to pity but someone to respect. As she reached her usual spot near the railing, she saw a few familiar faces. The street musician tuning his guitar, a couple walking their dog, and a man who sold balloons to kids. For once, she didn't feel invisible among them. She felt like she belonged here, like the pier wasn't just a place she visited, but a place that knew her story now. She took out her phone, opened social media, and froze. There it was, a video. Someone had recorded the whole thing. The title said something like "Bikers Defend Disabled Girl from Bullies at Santa Monica Pier." Her heart skipped a beat as she pressed play. At first, she wasn't sure if she wanted to watch it, but curiosity took over. The video started with her sitting quietly by the railing, then showed the teenagers walking up to her. Her stomach turned seeing that moment again, but then the bikers appeared, strong, calm, and protective. The video showed the entire scene of them stepping in, talking to the teens and making them apologize. The sound of the ocean mixed with the deep voices and the murmurs of the crowd. The comment section was full of people, reacting. Those bikers are real heroes. This made me cry. We need more people like them in this world. Sending love to the girl, she's so brave. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but not from sadness. For the first time in a long time, she felt proud of herself. Proud that she didn't run. Proud that she stayed strong even when it hurt. She kept scrolling, and one comment caught her attention. Someone had written, "I'm a teacher and I showed this to my students today. We talked about kindness and courage." Another said, "My daughter uses a wheelchair too." Seeing this gave her so much hope. It was overwhelming. She couldn't believe that something so painful could turn into something that made people feel inspired. Later that afternoon, as she sat near the railing again, a little boy approached her. He was maybe 6 or 7, holding a toy car in one hand and his mother's hand in the other. "Hi," he said shyly. "Are you the girl from the video?" Lily blinked, a little surprised. "I guess I am," she said softly. The boy smiled. "You're really cool," he said. His mom smiled too, nodding. "He wanted to meet you," she said. "We saw your video this morning. You were really brave." Lily smiled. "Thank you," she said. "That means a lot." The boy looked up at her with big, curious eyes. "Were you scared?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "Yeah," she said honestly. "But sometimes being brave means doing what's right even when you're scared." The boy nodded seriously like he understood every word. Then he handed her his toy car. "You can have this," he said. "It's my lucky car. It makes me brave." Lily's heart melted. "That's really sweet of you," she said. "But you should keep it." He grinned and shook his head. "You need it more." His mom laughed softly, and Lily carefully took the toy car. "Thank you," she said again. "I'll keep it safe." They waved goodbye and walked off, and Lily sat there holding the little car in her lap. She looked out at the waves and smiled to herself. That tiny gesture, from a little boy she didn't even know, felt like a sign that maybe everything that happened had a purpose. Later that week, she got a message request on her phone. It was from someone named Ben, the leader of the biker group. His message was short and kind. "Hey kid, saw the video went viral. We didn't plan for that, but I'm glad people saw what really matters. We're doing a charity ride next weekend for kids with disabilities. If you want, come be our guest of honor." Lily read the message twice before smiling wide. She typed back, "I'd love to." When the weekend came, the sound of motorcycles filled the air long before she reached the lot where they gathered. Dozens of bikes lined up, gleaming under the sun. Men and women in leather jackets talked and laughed together, but when Lily arrived, all eyes turned to her with warm smiles. Ben walked up to her and grinned. "There she is," he said. "The bravest girl on the pier." Lily laughed softly. "That's not true," he nodded. "Oh, I think it is." They spent the afternoon talking, taking pictures, and sharing stories. Some of the bikers told her about their own struggles. One had lost a leg in an accident, another had been bullied when he was young. Lily realized that everyone there had faced their own kind of battle. That's what made them understand her pain without her even saying a word. When it was time for the ride to start, Ben handed Lily a small black leather vest with a patch on the back that said Honor Rider. "This is for you," he said. "You're part of the family now." Lily stared at it, speechless. "Really?" He smiled. "Really? You earned it." They helped her onto a special bike with a sidecar designed for passengers. The engine started with a deep rumble, and soon the whole group rolled out together down the coast highway. The wind brushed her face as the ocean stretched endlessly beside them. For once, she didn't feel small or weak. She felt free, truly free. Cars honked as they passed, people waved, and she couldn't stop smiling. The sound of all those engines together felt like a heartbeat, strong, powerful, unstoppable. After the ride, they stopped at a park overlooking the beach. Ben sat beside her on a bench watching the sunset. "You know," he said, "life has a strange way of giving us moments that test who we are. What happened to you that day, it wasn't fair. But the way you handled it, that's what made it mean something." Lily looked at him quietly. "I didn't really do anything," she said. "You're the ones who stood up for me." He shook his head. "You did something just as important. You didn't let hate turn you bitter. You stayed kind. That's real strength." She thought about his words for a while. Then she smiled softly. "I guess that's true." The sky turned golden, then pink, and the sound of waves echoed in the distance. For the first time in years, Lily didn't feel like she was waiting for life to get better. It already was. A week later, the story was everywhere. News outlets picked it up, schools talked about it in assemblies, people shared it online with messages about kindness and courage. But Lily didn't care about the attention. What mattered to her was what came after. The letters from kids who said the story made them feel stronger, the smiles from strangers who recognized her at the pier, and the feeling that her pain had helped create something good. Every time she went back to the pier, she saw people a little differently now. There were still mean ones sometimes, still people who didn't understand, but there were also more who smiled, more who helped, more who cared. And that was enough. One evening, as the sky turned soft and quiet again, she took the little toy car out of her bag, the one the boy had given her. She placed it on the railing beside her and whispered, "You were right, kid. It really does make me brave." She sat there until the sun dipped below the horizon, the colors fading into the water, her heart peaceful. She knew life wouldn't always be easy, but she also knew she wasn't alone anymore. Because somewhere out there, she could still hear the distant sound of engines, the sound of people who had her back, who had reminded her that even in a world that can be cruel, kindness always finds its way through. And from that day on, every time she saw a group of bikers pass by, she smiled, not because they had saved her, but because they had reminded her that even when life knocks you down, there's always someone ready to lift you up again.